So I've been woodworking for a while now. And when I first began, I didn't have what they call a workshop. Well, I didn't even have a designated place to work. I used to typically bring out my tools and use the kitchen counter as my workbench. And then I bought this. It's a foldable workbench with a built-in vise and was sturdy enough for my purposes. But as I've gone along and taken up more larger and complex projects, I said, you know what, this isn't cutting it anymore. So I decided to build myself a workbench. I had some factors to consider and some constraints to work around. So, number one, no space. I had to have a workbench that could store under my table for easy storage. Number two, mobility. It had to have wheels so I could move it around. Number three, storage. It's supposed to have enough storage to store all my tools and supplies. Number four, power. It's supposed to have a centralized power system for which I could power all my tools. And number five, it's supposed to be sturdy. It has to be extremely robust and be able to take the beatings of a typical workbench. So let's see how I did it.
So to begin with, I used 18mm plywood to create a main frame for the work table. I used wood glue to glue up the side panels of this table. After the glue was dry, I measured out the center of this piece and marked it. At this section in the center, we glued in a center brace. Now we took our time and marked the top panel of our workbench. These lines you see me drawing here give me a reference line to where I need to apply glue to actually glue the panel. Here you can see me gluing up every edge and face that needs to be attached so that it is a secure hold. Now once the main frame was finished, I wanted to create a raised elevated platform above my workbench. So I took another piece of plywood and I found these MDF braces. Here you can see me marking out the places where I need to glue. Here you can see that I took my time spreading the glue on all the faces that need to be attached. This makes it so that the MDF braces don't come loose and it makes a very secure bond. So here you see us use a right angle tool to check if the MDF is square. So now I apply glue to the opposite side of the faces, spread it around properly and then try to attach it. Here you can see that I overturned the platform and attached it to the workbench. The glue spreads around, so I try to wipe it off as to reduce sanding, and here the elevated platform is finished. As I mentioned, I needed some storage for my tools, my clamps and all my other supplies. So I cut up some pieces of 12mm plywood, which is relatively lighter, to create the drawers. Here you can see me glue up the pieces that I just cut. I glued them up in an I shape with thicker pieces towards the edges so that I would have more place to install the industrial style guide rails for the drawers. Since this is 12mm plywood, it is difficult to screw in, so I use nails and a hammer to secure the board. Then I flip the piece over and do the same for the other side. I wanted to add a more interesting face to the drawer, something with a bit more aesthetic value, so I took this laminate MDF, taped it in place, and then drilled the holes out and screwed them. Here I add a back plate to the drawer. Basically I wanted to ensure that if I put things in, they won't fall out. So I glued it, aligned it and then used the same hammer and nail trick to tack it in place. Here you can see the drawer slides that I bought. They're industrial class and can hold a lot of weight while extended out. So here I mark and drill the holes out and then screw it in. This is the other side of the drawer slide that goes inside the cupboard. So basically I align the holes and use a self-tapping bit to screw these in. And here's how the drawers ended out. As you can see, they can hold a lot of weight, as by my toolboxes. Here you only see 2 drawers, but I ended up making 4. 2 of them for my tools and other supplies, and 2 of them for small odds and ends and hand tools. Since I wanted a workbench that I could move around my house, I ended up using these locking rubber casters. Using a scale and a speed square, I aligned them slightly offset and marked the holes. I then chucked up a bit and drilled the holes out. An important thing to know while working with plywood is that when you cut it or drill it through, it makes a lot of splinters. So here you can see me taking my orbital sander and sanding both the faces smooth. Once the holes were drilled and sanded, I took the wheel and realigned them on the holes. I then took a bolt and a washer and then pushed them through all the holes. To secure this on the opposite side, I had to put a nut and washer on each bolt. In this section, you see me chuck up a bolt driver. My dad used a wrench to hold the nuts on the inside of the cupboard and then I tightened them in. I did the same for all 4 bolts in this wheel and then for the rest of the 3 wheels as well. As I mentioned before, my previous table had a built-in vise functionality and I wanted to recreate that because it was really handy. So I took 2 factory cut pieces of MDF, 2 very long bolts and 2 wing nuts to recreate that. This vise, if you did not know, is called Moxon woodworking vise. It's extremely helpful for clamping up some workpieces or things that need to be cut. Here you see me clamp up a board in this vise, and I can tell you that it is extremely strong. Today was the final day of the build and it was time for sanding and painting. So here you see me take a 400 grit paper and lightly sand the top surface. This is to ensure no splinters stick out while painting and it's also extremely smooth to the touch. This was the stain that I ended up using. This was a teakwood finish with a polyurethane blend, which is kind of like a protective top coat. To use a finish like this, you have to first dress the bristles with the brush. So what I'm using here is lacquer thinner. What you have to do is take the brush and dip it inside the lacquer thinner, soaking the bristles with it. And here you can see me take the stain and paint the face of the table. I may or may not have lost the rest of the clips of me painting this table, but you can get the idea. And here's how it turned out.
So, this is it. Well, it turned out really well and I'm extremely impressed. It looks really good, but let's see how we did with the constraints. So, number 5, sturdy and robust. I mean, well, you can clearly see it's a tank here and it's on 4 lockable industrial rollers which can support around 100 kgs each, and they're lockable, so I can just stay it in place. Number 4, power. I mean, there's a switchboard here with 4 plugs and a reelable coil, so I can plug it and then reel it back so that it doesn't hang out. Number 3, storage. Well, you can see there are 2 shelves here for some small hand tools, sandpaper, and just gloves. And there are 2 smaller drawers where I clamp where I keep my clamps and some small stuff, hand tools, measuring devices, etc. Then there are two larger drawers here, which keep my other tools, supplies, and jigs. Then, number two, mobility. Well, you can see it's on wheels. It moves, and I can move it around my house. And number one, the storage. So, well, you can see it slots right in. I hope you had as much fun as I did. Well, if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be deeply appreciated. And that being said, my name is Vedant. This is now Demystifying Central, and I'll catch you in the next one.